Aging. Our body reaches its peak at about age 30. Then it begins to decline. But why do we age? What is the aging process? What causes Alzheimer's disease? In this program, we are going to try and answer these questions. In the Middle Ages, people seldom lived longer than 40 or 50 years. Of course, a few exceptional cases were recorded. They say that during the 17th century, an English farmer boasted that he was 150 years old. Could be, but not likely. No one ever checked his birth certificate. Today we know that a human being's maximum life expectancy is 115 years. And this hasn't changed for several thousand years. What has changed is the average life expectancy of human beings. We live much longer than we used to, and this we owe largely to hygiene and Pasteur. Discoveries made by medical science, dietetics, and biology only played a secondary role. But who doesn't wish for eternal youth? Deep down, we all harbor our own little Dr. Faust, who would sell his soul to the devil to be 20 again. Scientists wonder as well, why do we age? Do we wear out, or is it the result of some biological determinism? First age, second age, third age. According to popular belief, we only begin to age when we become adults. But in light of recent research on the aging process, that no longer holds true. In fact, it seems that the aging process in human beings begins at birth. And a great deal of research is going into demonstrating that the key to aging lies in the very heart of cells. Aging is genetically programmed for each species. The mouse, for instance, has a maximum lifespan of 5 years. The chimpanzee, 50. Man, around 115 years. During their lifetimes, human beings go through several major changes that occur at specific moments. Menopause is perhaps the most convincing example of the fact that aging is regulated by a biological clock. Gerontologists know that our organs age differently. For instance, the kidney ages more slowly than other organs. On the other hand, the thymus, the gland that produces antibodies, atrophies quickly. But we also know that environmental factors influence the aging process. For example, tobacco, sun radiation, pollutants, stress, and even excessive physical exercise can cause our cells to become oxidized. Our cells become oxidized naturally, a little like a car that begins to rust. Oxidation disturbs the cell's normal activity and entails the production of radicals. These are in fact fragments of molecules or atoms which have at least one unpaired electron. They are intensely active. The radical stage revolutions inside a cell. They may also leave the cell, cling to another one, and break its membrane. When this occurs, aging is accelerated. Moreover, radicals are capable of altering genes and can thus deprogram cells, which could lead to cancer. While all human beings age approximately the same way, the fact remains that, excluding identical twins, we all have our own genetic heritage. In recent years, scientists have been looking to genetic engineering to explain the aging process. Among the many thousands of genes that each person has, there may only be a few that are directly related to aging. Some researchers believe that these genes slow down the development of cells and immobilize them, a little like a car driver easing off the gas pedal and slowly applying the brakes. Studies on live cells growing in a culture environment have enabled scientists to identify a protein that might be linked to aging: statin. Statin is produced by the family of genes associated with aging. It is found in the tissue of all living organisms during the last stages of life. But scientists are still attempting to find a link between statin and aging. Almost all human beings have a genetic heritage of their own, and our genes of aging affect us all differently. Scientists now believe that premature aging might be avoided or life expectancy prolonged, but only to a certain degree. For human beings to live 115 years, their genetic heritage would have to undergo in-depth modification. In the meantime, all we can do is attempt to delay the aging process. Well, immortality is not around the corner, so we might as well age the best we can. There are lotions, drugs, miracle creams, surgery. Unfortunately, the results seldom live up to our expectations. Some scientists are convinced that vitamin E prevents the oxidation of cells, but we're still a far way off from the elixir of youth. The prejudices about getting old die hard. Did you know that at 80, the novelist Marguerite Yourcenar gave lectures encouraging people to protect the environment? They would have us believe that aging is a nightmare, that our memories go, we become incoherent, that we regress to the point where one day, our mental faculties impaired, we find ourselves rocking by the fire like happy 3-year-old children. Well, fortunately, science helps us distinguish between myth and reality. During a normal lifetime, a human being can lose up to 10% of the 100 billion neurons the brain has at birth. And this phenomenon begins in the very first few days. Some researchers believe that the central cortex, the thinking part of the brain, alone loses up to 50,000 neurons per day. More importantly, the number of connections between the neurons, the ones that transmit information in our brain, gradually decreases. The brain's chemical messengers, the neurotransmitters, also become scarce. Such a gloomy picture could leave you thinking that the elderly have lost a major portion of their mental faculties. And yet, this is not the case. While we can lose up to 10% of our neurons during our lifetime, we don't lose our mental faculties in the same proportions. Moreover, the brain conserves its plasticity over time. This means that even at an advanced age, human beings are able to create new neuronal networks, depending on their activities. Another hypothesis, now rejected, held that blood flow to the brain decreased with advancing age and that mental activity decreased proportionately. But nowadays, thanks to the latest medical imaging techniques, scientists know that the amount of blood, hence of oxygen, that irrigates the brain of the elderly is about the same as for people in their 20s. So why do the elderly complain they are losing their memory? lacking concentration or intellectual alertness? Part of the answer relates to their immediate environment. Isolation, loss of employment, and a decrease in activities are all factors which inevitably contribute to a reduction of mental work. To these external factors, sensory and perceptual changes must be added. Sight, taste, smell, and hearing diminish. Even if the external information remains the same, the quantity of stimuli reaching the brain decreases. The brain is asked to perform less. But the brain doesn't react to advancing age in a uniform way. How the brain's hemispheres age depends on the degree of use and the development of each individual. For instance, people who have used the left hemisphere most of their life will find that it ages more slowly than the right hemisphere. Also, reading, writing, and comprehension change little with advancing age. However, verbal and visual memory, along with the ability to reproduce certain complex drawings, do deteriorate as we get older. Normal aging is accompanied by memory loss resulting from the death of neurons in the hippocampus, the part of the brain associated with memory. But all the components of memory are not affected in the same way. The elderly have trouble remembering recent events, while their memory of events of many years ago is somewhat less affected. However, the mnesic functions may not be directly affected. Some believe that the problem resides in the coding and decoding of information. The capacity to remember is intact, but the information received is poorly processed as it enters and leaves the brain. In spite of these drawbacks, the elderly can continue to learn new things, like a new language, for example. However, owing to memorization and concentration difficulties, the learning process will usually require greater sustained effort. While we haven't yet succeeded in discovering all the secrets of aging, we do know that physiological, neurological, and environmental factors are involved. We all age differently. Aging implies adapting to new conditions. Rewarding activities are harder to come by. Intellectual stimulation less frequent. Then, often there are money problems as well. Solitude becomes harder to bear. Sooner or later, family and friends disappear. It seems that loneliness is the #1 cause of suicide among the elderly. And the body isn't what it used to be. At New Year's, old people will usually wish you good health. That's normal. The older you get, the more precious good health becomes. Even if your heart and kidney at 60 are like a young person's, there are always other problems: indigestion, insomnia, arthritis, back pain. But there are some diseases that are far worse, which accelerate the aging process at an appalling rate. One of the most mysterious of these is Alzheimer's disease. It's becoming more and more common and poses a major challenge to modern medicine. The most serious manifestation of pathological aging was identified in 1907 by a German psychologist, Alois Alzheimer. characterized by progressive and irreversible loss of memory, as well as general intellectual impairment. Alzheimer's disease strikes 1 out of 20 elderly people. It is the 4th major cause of death in North America, after heart disease, cancer, and cerebrovascular accidents. The cause of Alzheimer's disease is unknown, and there is no known treatment. Death occurs after a few years, usually preceded by a deterioration of mental faculties, insomnia, and advanced senility. But Alzheimer's disease doesn't only affect the elderly. The first case identified by Alois Alzheimer involved a woman in her 50s. The use of animals in laboratory tests to find effective treatment is limited because animals do not get this disease. However, scientists are trying to link the normal aging process in animals to some symptoms displayed by human beings with Alzheimer's. If correlations are found, then drugs could be tested on animals before they are administered to humans. In addition, it is extremely difficult for doctors to make a definitive diagnosis. In fact, the diagnosis is a result of a process of elimination. For instance, other diseases showing similar symptoms, like tumors, are discarded by means of a series of biological and neuropsychological tests. The exclusion process is still the only means to diagnose Alzheimer's. But it isn't until the patient has died and an autopsy is performed that doctors can be 100% sure the disease was indeed Alzheimer's. Autopsies have shown that the disease entails serious lesions in the cerebral cortex and hippocampus, and that massive destruction of neurons causes atrophy of the brain. Researchers have also noted in the brains of Alzheimer's victims a substantial decrease of certain neurotransmitters. The neurotransmitters are the chemical substances in the brain that convey information. This is true of acetylcholine, a neurotransmitter associated with cognition and memory, which decreases significantly in people with Alzheimer's. Currently, researchers are focusing on trying to detect Alzheimer's disease before the first symptoms of memory loss become apparent. Once this occurs, the disease is considered to be irreversible and impossible to curtail. Since 1982, a research team has been following the evolution of some 200 volunteers over the age of 45. Every year, the quantity of 2 hormones in their blood, cortisol and melatonin, is measured. Both these hormones indicate concentrations of certain neurotransmitters in the brain. They are secreted according to a given pattern every 24 hours. Recently, a change in this regular pattern has been observed in people with Alzheimer's disease. Owing to statistical studies, we already know that 5 to 6% of the volunteers taking part in the research will suffer from Alzheimer's. The researchers will therefore be able to determine whether variations in cortisol and melatonin secretion are linked to the appearance of the disease. The research might make early detection possible, in which case something might be done before it's too late. Meanwhile, various drugs are currently under study, such as THA, which could offset the loss of the 3 neurotransmitters believed to be associated with Alzheimer's, namely acetylcholine, norepinephrine, and serotonin. The drugs will only be beneficial if they are administered in the early stages of the disease. In tests, some patients have recovered part of their ability to write or remember. But these drugs are not curative. They do not cure the disease. At present, research is attempting to understand and control the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. However, studies have failed to discover its cause. I feel sad for the people who are in such a hurry to retire and then gradually give up all their normal activities and cut themselves off from all social life. The secret of happy old age is simple: staying active and being useful.